on this side here. Okay. We're going to talk about legal structures. You need to have one. You cannot go into business without deciding what your legal structure is going to be. So there's no, you can not do some things in this game, but you must decide on this one. And it's a pretty hard decision to make. Hopefully tonight I'm going to make it easier for you to figure out what to do. So the first thing we must deal with when we're talking about legal structure is the concept of an entity. Unless you've been an accountant or you're a lawyer maybe, you don't understand, probably haven't come across the word entity. And because an entity can be a living or non-living thing, which has a distinct, separate and independent existence. And so we in this room are entities because we have, except in the life of Brian, where the guy says, well, I'm not. You're all the same. Well, there's one guy that's not. We're all individuals. We're all distinct individuals. We all have a distinct existence, distinct and separate existence from one another. That's what an entity is. But it carries over in the business world that entities get created by law. That is, entities that have their own existence, separate and distinct from everyone else, get created by law. And some of those entities we're going to cover tonight. The most common one, as you've already talked about tonight, is a company. Now, a company is just not another half of you. A company is a separate and distinct entity. That's why a company can go broke and lose all its money and the owner doesn't lose anything, because it's only the company's assets that got stripped, not the owner's assets that got stripped, because the company is a separate and distinct entity. If your neighbor goes broke, it doesn't affect you because your neighbor's a separate and distinct entity. If your company goes broke, it doesn't affect you because it's a separate, distinct entity. So the first thing we need to understand is the concept of entity. And then the second problem we have is that 3 different organizations in Australia treat entity differently. In other words, a legal entity is quite different from an accounting entity, is quite different from a tax entity. And you need to be able to understand, differentiate each one. So that's why I say tonight is a little bit heavy going, but it's really important that you understand these concepts. So a legal entity is something that can sue or be sued. It can sign contracts in its own name, and every business must have a legal entity. There has to be some entity in your business that is identified as the person or the thing or the entity legally responsible for running that particular business. So a legal entity is that position. When we're talking about a business or accounting entity, a business or accounting entity is, regardless of its legal status, an accounting firm will treat the owner of the business and the business as 2 separate entities and keep financial records separate and distinct in each case. So when your accountant is talking about your business, they are talking about your accounting entity. But if it's a sole trader, your accounting entity and you legally are the one thing. I know that sounds really hard to understand. While your accountant is separating the 2 and saying there's a business entity and there's a you entity, when it comes to legally as a sole trader, in a sole trader, the legal person responsible for the failure of that business is the person. So in terms of the law, there is only one entity, you. In terms of accounting, there's 2. And we'll look at how tax law changes as well. So you've just got to be really careful in this area of the concept of entity. Is your accountant will treat any business as a separate entity. Doesn't really even look at the legal aspect of it. If it's trading and as a separate entity that's trading, it treats it as a separate entity in terms of how it reports the financial arrangement. But in terms of law, the law only recognises certain entities as legal entities. In other words, the ones that can be sued or not, or so. So maybe a few of you get together and you call yourself the Darts Club. You work out of the local pub. You decide to go and buy something as the Darts Club. There is no legal entity in the Darts Club. If you haven't incorporated it, if you haven't gone and created an organisation out of it, there's no legal entity. So you can't actually enter into, even though you've got a logo and you've called yourself the Darts Club and you've got a Facebook page and you've got all of these things, you actually aren't a legal entity. And so if they did a contract with the Darts Club, it would be null and void because there's no legal entity. They would have to do a contract with one of the partners, one of the people of the Darts Club. You can only do business with someone who's a legal entity. I'm sorry I've confused you already, but let's keep going. So I'll give you this sheet. I'll put this up to Box, so I'm not going to go through it at the moment. It's just that we have 4 different entities that you can trade in Australia. There are others. They're a bit sneaky, but I'll give you the 4 main ones. One is a sole trader. Sole trader, and we'll talk about that in a minute. A sole trader is a legal entity. It's a separate accounting entity, but it's not a tax entity. When a sole trading business works out its profits, all those profits go to the owner and say, mate, you've got to deal with this. You've just made money out of your business. You're a sole trader. It's your responsibility before the tax. So a legal entity, a sole trader doesn't put in a tax return. I'm talking about sole trading business. The owner of the sole trader is the legal entity and the tax entity. Partnerships, and you can go through there and have a look. But what happens is that a tax entity, a legal entity, and an accounting entity are all treated differently. So when we're talking about the concept of entity or who owns or who's responsible, depends what question you're asking. I mean, the weird thing about tax entity is this, that you can be an alien. In other words, you've come in on a boat or a plane and you're here illegally, but if you make money, you don't exist as a citizen. You actually are called an alien. You don't exist. Under Australian law, you don't exist. But if you make money, you've got to pay tax. You might make money illegally, and that's against the law. But if you make money, you still got to pay tax. The tax law sees everyone as a citizen, you know. But illegally, so that's what I'm saying. Legally, you don't exist. But if you make money, you got to pay tax. So go figure. So the tax law likes to just make everyone an entity, because that's the safest way that they can to raise their money. But legally we're not, there's not always a legal entity. Okay, let's look at these 4. So you all touched on this tonight, which is great. Sole trader, partnership, PTY, LTD, and trust. We've already said that there's a public company option, but unless you guys have got $500,000 to spend on setting a public company up, I would suggest that it's probably not an option for us. Most public companies started as proprietary limited companies, grew to a size sufficient to then do a transfer to a public company. So public company is another option. An organisation, registered organisation, which is what Phil and myself have, is also an option, but that's meant to be a non-profit organisation. So it's probably not a good vehicle to make profit out of. Some businesses do it that way. It's just that all the money that gets made in an organisation has to go back in the organisation, and the organisation is totally controlled by the membership. So you might get away with it year 1, year 2 they're going to sack you, aren't they? Because the organisation will get members and the members will vote and kick you out. So it's not a good structure to go out and try and make money out of. These are the 4 options for most of us that we're going to look at. So sole trader, individual who runs a business totally for themselves. But it's not a legal entity. You don't sue the sole proprietor business. You sue the sole proprietor. You sue the owner of the business. If they're trading as a sole trader, you sue the owner of the business, not the business itself. Partnerships, where 2 or more individuals get together to share a profit, to share profits. Again, not a legal entity. You can't sue a partnership, you sue a partner. And the trick with partnerships is you sue the most wealthiest partner, because that's all you've got to take down, because each partner is responsible for the total partnership debt, each one. Each partner in a partnership is responsible for all the debts of the partnership. So you pick the guy with the biggest house and the biggest boat and you go after him, and then say to him, now that you've paid us, you work it out amongst yourselves who's going to kick in for you. That's how partnerships work. Proprietary limited company is a new legal entity. It's controlled by the Corporations Act. It's a Commonwealth government law, and the Commonwealth government has said, we will allow, if you follow certain conditions, we will allow you to create a new entity, create existence. And if you're talking about creating existence, this is the big one. This actually, you create existence, not just the way I've been talking about, you know, naming and marketing and mantras and all that sort of stuff. This is genuinely creating existence, because you actually create a new legal entity when you create a company. It exists. It can be sued. It can enter into contracts. It's its own person. Obviously, it needs help, and that's why we have directors. But it is actually creating existence. And if you can take your business to that level, that's great. There are costs, obviously, associated with each of these steps. Then there's a thing called discretionary trust. It's got to be the weirdest structure that exists. And get this, ready? Only in Australia can you trade a business as a discretionary trust. And that's got a lot to do with our convict heritage, yeah? Because the discretionary trust is designed to rip people off. That's what it exists for. Every other, now there's 220 countries on the planet. 219 of them outlaw a discretionary trust to be used in business, because it's a way to hide money from people that you owe money to. Yeah, only in Australia do we allow it. And the reason this law will never be changed is because every politician has one of these. They have all of their assets in trust so that you can't touch them. They don't care about being sued because all their money's in trust. You can't touch it. It's in a trust, and a trust is a really weird arrangement, and I'm going to have a go in a minute at trying to explain it. But it's a relationship where a trustee carries on a business for beneficiaries. And here, this is the thing about it. It can hold assets, it can distribute profits, but it can't be sued. It's not a legal entity. So can you sort of get a picture of why you would create a trust? Yeah, because it holds all your family assets, but it can never be, you can't touch it. You can't. My son is a liquidation lawyer, a liquidation accountant, and he says as soon as we see a trust, we know we can't put our hand in and touch it. Amazing.
Can anyone open that?
Yeah. If a politician can do it, we can. Let me just see. Yep.
How do you get your money out of the trust then?
Well, the trust has to distribute its profits every year.
Oh, okay.
A profit,
So it's like stock.
Yeah, it makes money. The trust makes money, and then it has to distribute it. But here's the other great thing about a trust: it can distribute it to anyone. It can distribute it to anyone that's on your list. Your great-great-grandmother, your 3-month-old baby. It can distribute, and you can see the tax advantage of distributing money to a wide range of people, because you can earn up to about $18,000 without paying tax if you've got the right accountant. So you can see how they can split that money, so there's not much tax being paid either, can you?
Why doesn't everyone just open a trust?
Because it costs about $3,000 to set one up, and not everyone can go and do that. So, and you've got to have a trading business. It's no sense in having it that it's not trading. And the only reason you would do it is if you've got a lot of assets and you've got a very profitable business.
So the difference between a discretionary trust and, say, a trust fund you set up with the bank, what would the difference?
Similar concept, but a discretionary trust is a particular vehicle that gets used to trade a business. You trade a business as a discretionary. There's a lot of other trusts, unit trusts. Some of you might know about property trusts, where everyone puts money in to go and buy a property, and there's a whole lot of different trusts. The discretionary trust is one where it's discretionary because it's up to the trust who it wants to share the funds with. So every year it can decide to distribute the funds in a different way. So let me just, yeah, go on.
Sorry, who owns the trust then?
No one.
What? Can a sole trader in partnership open a trust?
No, trust is, you've got to decide to go with the trust. Let me try and explain sort of what happens. Let me just explain the simple one and where it all came from, this concept. So here's me, and I'm thinking of investing money for my children. I want to put $50,000 aside to get. I want to put $50,000 into a trust for my kids. So what I do is I take that $50,000 out of my bank account and I put it into a trust. Then the trust is going to pay that money to my kids. And to manage that trust, I'm going to put a trustee. I'm going to say to this trustee, I want you to manage this trust, and here's the deed that I want you to follow in managing that trust. All right, let's try and figure out who owns that $50,000. The trust is not an entity, it's an arrangement. So it can't be sued. It's not a legal entity. It's holding this 50,000, but it can't be sued because it's just an arrangement. It's just a deal that you've come up with. The trustee, first of all, do I own the money? No, I've given it to the trust. I've signed the money out of my bank account into the trust's bank account. Do I own the money anymore? I don't. I've transferred the money to a trust, to an arrangement. Can't be brought back. Do the kids own it? No, they can only get that money out of the trust if it's according to the deed. These people are the beneficiaries. Spell check, but you get the figure. You get the figure. These are the beneficiaries. The kids don't own the trust. They are the beneficiaries of the trust, but they don't own it. They don't own the money. No sense suing the kids for the trust. They said, well, we don't get it till we're 18 either, so go figure. And then it gets spent on school fees, not on ours, so don't go coming to us. The trustee says, it's not my money. I'm just managing it on behalf of this. It's money that lives in an arrangement that can't be touched. It doesn't exist. Yeah, and this sounds really weird in today that one country on the planet allows this to exist, and that's us, Australia. Woohoo! It can only be our convicts. Our convicts somehow got into the legal system, and they said this is a deal because we can actually fail at business. They get the assets of the company, but they can't touch the trust. And my son will come here tonight, and he'll tell you that as a liquidation lawyer, that's an accountant that's done 700 liquidations. As soon as he comes across a trust, he knows he can't put his hand in and touch it because it's not owned by anyone. The money's not owned by anyone. So you won't understand any of that, but just understand that it exists. Was that something?
Yeah, so if me dies and the kid's not old enough, but when do the kids get it?
So it would be
18.
up to
Whatever says in the deal,
Whatever says there,
Okay.
this guy manages on that.
Who writes that though?
Can me change the deed?
Well, while you're alive, yeah, while you're alive, you can change the deed. Not only that, there is a legal entity in all this that you can sue, the trustee. So you know what you do? You ring the trustee as soon as he gets sued and say, you're fired. I've got a new trustee that's going to manage this trust for me. Go fight your own battles. Your problem. You're the legal entity. The trustee has no access to the money apart from what's in the deed.
Can you make yourself a trustee?
Yeah,
No.
she's got to ask.
No, you wouldn't do that. That'd be stupid.
But could you?
You can.
What we normally do is make a company a trustee.
That's what.
We make a PTY Ltd company as the trustee. Can you see that creates another barrier? That actually another entity controls it. But wait, you can be the director of the company, and you remain. You know the me. You become what they call the appointer.
Does that mean you can get sued because now you're a company?
The company can get sued, but like I say, as soon as they get sued, if you're still around, you sack the company. You say you're no longer the trustee for my firm. I've appointed another person.
You get fired then.
If you get fired from the company,
If you're working in the company, so you can do that. You can be the director of the company.
yeah, you can be the director of the company if you want to, but you can control the directorships. Go on.
Okay, so say you are the director of the company, and then you want to file the company, so you're firing.
All right, you're being silly now. No, I'm not saying you're being silly.
That's-
You're asking questions that you would pay $250 an hour to get the answer to, and we're not here to do that. Go on.
Is discretionary trust different from a family trust? Or
Same thing. It's the family trust basically only allows you to distribute money to family. Discretionary trust allows you to distribute money to anyone. So most of us have gone with discretionary trust because it gives us the freedom of having partnerships and all sorts of things like that. So family trust is a little bit more limiting. Discretionary trust is a little bit more open. Let's see if I can. So look, I'm just saying that that's a really confusing arrangement, isn't it?
Peter, with
So
And that's where it gets its benefit.
Gina Reinhardt's
Yeah.
issue, that's the kids objecting to the way the trustee is managing the trust, and they are trying to sack Gina.
They'll
as
find some angle in it. But the typical structure is this. The typical structure is me. I appoint a trustee, which is a PTY Ltd company, and it trades the business. Let me try and work this out. The Baskerville Family Trust as such and such Proprietary Limited as the trustee for the Baskerville Family Trust.
do you have a trust?
Yeah, of course. That operates this business. So when someone says, what's the structure that you've set up for us, we would say it's, for us, it's Now Master Proprietary Limited as trustee for the Baskerville Family Trust, operating a certain business, Ambrosia or whatever. So in terms of someone who's coming to sue you is coming to sue the business, and they say, well, I can't sue the business because the business is actually owned by the trust. The trust, I can't really sue the trust, so I head for the trustee. The trustee, guess what the trustee is? A trustee has been set up with a thing called $2 worth of equity. You can only sue a company for the value of its equity. You can't sue a company for the value of its assets because it's probably got assets of $100,000, but it also has loans to me for $100,000. So the only amount you can sue a company for is the value of its equity. And the equity in these companies is $2 companies. So, and anyway, this is a trustee. And if someone sues that trustee, I just appoint a new person, a new trustee company, a new PTY Ltd to look after the trust, and say to this guy, you go and fight your own battles. And if they beat you, you make sure you pay them the whole $2. It's amazing, isn't it? All right.
So what you're
So-
saying, anyone that has $3,000 go and get a trust.
Yeah, you've got it. Tonight we're going to look at various case studies. I'll make sure we leave time for that. And we're going to look at various scenarios, and you tell me which is the right. Now, this is the Rolls Royce. It's a bit like me selling you a Rolls Royce tonight, yeah? And you all go, wow, got to have one of them. And then I tell you how much it is. You look at your starting capital and you go, well, why would I spend all of my starting capital getting a Rolls Royce business structure without having any customers and product? Stupid, you know? So all of these things are plus and minus, advantage and disadvantage. And you need to say, but I don't even know whether my business is really going to work. Why would I go and blow $3,000 on something that's probably, and I'm saying $3,000, that's what we would pay. You might, walking in from the street, pay more than that, but that's what we would probably have to pay just to set that structure up, because we've got past deeds and past companies and past lots of stuff. So let's just move on and see how we go. Now, all I attempted to do there is to explain to you how confusing the whole thing is. Yeah. Welcome to the world of trusts, PTYs, and that's the job done. Yeah.
If you already had a family trust
Yep.
and you opened a business, working wise, put that into that trust.
Yeah, you've got to make the decision as to whether you want to add it to that trust or whether you want to set up a new trust. If the trust is holding assets on behalf of family for another reason, maybe it's not wise. Maybe it's better to have a business. What this gets called is a trading trust. It's the trust that you use to operate your business. If your other trust is set up as a kids fund for disaster, I wouldn't be getting into that. I'd just leave that to one side and set up one that you call a trading trust and register it with the tax office and all that and say, this is the legitimate thing. And if you pick on me, remember you're picking on all the politicians.
It's got to create dramas for getting credit terms.
Yes. No, this is, it all sounded there was some fun bits there, but you haven't heard the bad bits. And that's what we're going to cover now. Let's have a quick look through here. When you're choosing a business structure, you've got to think about the amount of capital you've got. If you've got $3,000, the last thing you should do is set up a trust. You should spend that $3,000 on customer acquisition and product delivery. You know, don't go wasting money on structure. Get yourself a small proprietary, a small owner-operator business and get going. Don't go spending your money there. So capital has a big thing to it. Time frame. If you're thinking to set up a business that you really just want to hammer the Easter show in Brisbane and try and make a killing out of it, maybe investing too much into your company is not a smart thing to do. You know, really you just want to get product, get a stall, make money, get out of there. You're not even seeing beyond the Easter show, you know. Maybe, so that will determine what structure. You've got to have a structure, but that will determine what sort of structure. What sort of commitment? Are you really just in the test phase, guys? If you're really in just the test phase, let's not go spending money on structures. Let's get ourselves into the market first, find out what's working, and then maybe once we're through the beta phase, let's go get a more Rolls-Royce type of product. So all of these factors have a play. Your current tax status, if you've already got a high income tax, if you've already got a lot of assets or particularly high income tax, then that would sort of lean towards going into a tax relationship. If you've really not got any income coming into the family, then going for the saving of the big tax is not such a big deal because, you know, just in a normal company arrangement, you can save an awful lot of tax just by employing the wife and the kids in the cafe, which is what Phil and myself do. Protection of assets. If you've got a lot of assets, if you've got a lot of family assets, you know, maybe you'll want to do the more company and the more expensive company and trust arrangements, because if you're looking to protect that, you need to have that. If you haven't got a lot of big family assets to protect, why go and have all that asset protection when there's nothing really to protect? So again, you know, that's going to colour our judgment. Profit expectation. If you're only thinking about making wages out of this thing, well, we don't need to be going for all of those big tax, I don't want to say avoidance, but the tax minimisation schemes that are around trusts. Maybe you don't need to go into that. If your profit expectations are saying, look, Pete, I'm going to open this business. I think it's a wages-only business. I'll make good wages. I don't think I'm going to make $1 squillion out of it. Well, then maybe we should colour our structure a bit. The number of investors, if you've got quite a few investors, you might need to think about different structures. If it's just you, it's pretty clear what you can do. If you've got a number, you've got to be thinking about maybe we do a company, maybe we do a partnership or something like that. Future growth, if you're thinking of going into a franchise or something like that, you've probably got to be a proprietary limited company. Once you hide behind a trust, which is wonderful for a single operating thing, no one's going to do business with you, are they? Your franchisees, which you rely on trusting you, are not going to trust this company with the smokes and mirrors. So it's not going to work for you to go to a trust option if you're planning to a long-term think about franchising. You've really got to, well, you've got to stay in the proprietary limited. That's what you've really got to try and be. I mean, you can, yeah, you can have it hit because it all gets found out. You know, everything is subject to search, and the proprietary limited company comes up as being the trustee. And once people know there's a trust involved in the relationship, the banks will just go straight past that and say, I don't care what it is, you sign this document, you, not your company, not your trust, you. So if it all goes bad, we're coming after you. We're not coming after your fancy. And your franchisees would do the same. They would genuinely like to deal with just a company that will eventually go to a public company. And there's no smokes and mirrors in that sort of arrangement. So anyway, these things need to be discussed with your professional advisors. The type of business, if it's a heavy litigation business, you might need to think about trust. If it's not a heavy litigation business, if you haven't heard about people being sued for lollies being sold at a supermarket or at a market stall, well, maybe it's okay. But if you've got a business that's in medical or something like that, maybe you've got to be thinking about family trust, because this is a form of protection against heavy litigation.
How could you research that kind of thing, whether what you were going into was a dodgy?
It's sort of known, you know, if you spoke to any lawyer and said which industries, and maybe that's a good question for Cora, someone please, which industries attract a lot of litigation, you know, and journalism seems to, everyone's getting sued for defamation these days. It just is the in thing. So, you know, politicians, isn't it? You know, that's why they all hide behind a trust, because they're out there changing people's lives, sometimes for the worse. So mostly for the worst. And so, you know, they've got to hide behind it. So they're the things. Let's just run through. I'll leave this for you later. Sole trade is great. You can set up tonight as a sole trader and start trading. It's really good. Nothing wrong with it. You share all the profits. You've got full control. Nice way to get started. Disadvantages: you're personally liable for all the debts. You sign up, your business goes out and does stuff. You are the one that they come after. You are the legal entity of your sole proprietor business. You can't hide behind, oh, that's the business's debt. No, the business's debt comes straight to you. So there's no hiding as a sole proprietor. Your taxation is at the highest level. Once your business starts to get to a certain level, which is probably about 120,000, is it? About 120,000, you are paying the same as a company tax, which is about 30 cents in the dollar. Because remember, as a person, you actually get the tax-free thresholds and that sort of stuff. But once you get to about 100 and something thousand, 120,000 it is at the moment, you're actually starting to pay more than if your business was as a proprietary limited company. Because a proprietary limited company is a flat tax of 30% or 29%, whereas your individual tax has a sliding scale of nothing up to 48 cents in the dollar. So there's a point at which it crosses over, and we'll work that out later. Difficult to raise finance for as a sole trader, very, very difficult, unless you've got a family home with assets. You get, these concessions for small businesses that the government announces. That's small proprietary limited businesses. That's not small sole trader businesses. So when there's these depreciation advantages and when there's these handouts and these concessions, when they're talking about small business, they're not talking about sole traders. They're only talking about small proprietary limited businesses, which they control as the Commonwealth Government. So it's got advantages and disadvantages. We've got to think about what's good. Partnership. Reasonably inexpensive to set up, although you probably have to do a partnership agreement. And partnerships agreement is lawyers, and you're probably looking at a couple of $100, maybe more, $500 to get a partnership agreement done with the lawyers. It's got some advantages in the sense that you've got help from. Remember, I said to you, if you're heavily entrepreneurial, you probably need a business partner, and vice versa. So it's good to have someone in a partnership that actually can help you with that. But the other structures can help you do that as well. But that's why a lot of people go into it. And of course, if there's losses, well, you share them. Well, you hope you share them. If you're the richest guy in the partner, probably the sharing won't be quite as nice as you thought, because people are going to come suing you, and then you've got to try and get your money out of them, your partners, and they're probably in Fiji about now. Disadvantages. One of the most terrible things about partnerships is that while you're over in Fiji, your partner committed to something and you got committed to it as well. A partner in a business, when they commit the partnership to something, they commit every member of the partnership to that deal. So when they've signed up for something that you were away for and they didn't follow proper procedure of including you with it, you are equally liable for that debt. Yeah.
Could you not set up the contract of the partnership to say that everyone needs to sign off on it?
Really?
No, that's how it works. You'll have a case against that person for doing the wrong thing,
No, but
but the outside person will just sue all of you.
in a partnership agreement, I think.
Sure. And you're obviously in the wrong because the guy's broken your agreement, hasn't it? But the person from outside doesn't care about that. They just sue the best person in the partnership to sue. And then it's up to you to take that person to court, waste 100 grand trying to get 50 grand out of someone. Good luck, that's how it works. It's not pretty. Anyway, there's all of those things to be thinking about. But that's probably one of the worst ones. And you might have to come up with a partnership agreement. Company, there's a lot to be said for setting up a proprietary limited company, but it's not all good. Some of the advantages are, one, you create a separate legal entity. This time you've actually created existence. Separate tax, separate suing, separate everything. We know about the difference between proprietary limited and limited. If it's something just says limited at the end of its name, it's a public company, meaning it can raise money on the stock exchange. If it says proprietary limited, it means it's owned by private investors. It can sue and be sued, own property, and so forth. It's controlled by ASIC. You're all familiar with ASIC because that's where you get your business name. Commonwealth Government enforcer of corporations law is ASIC. And that's why I say when the government gives concessions, it gives concessions to small businesses who are proprietary limited companies, because that's the law in which they are operating under. Disadvantages, so this one, you can start a company from scratch. You can go to a lawyer and fill out all the paperwork, and you can do it from scratch, or you can buy it as a shelf company. Patricia Holdings Proprietary Limited is one of the biggest shelf company. What a shelf company means is a solicitor and an accountant gets together at the start of a year. They say, how many people are going to come to you for a company this year? And they say, between us about 2,000. Why don't we just set up 2,000 companies in one go at the start of the year and have them sitting there on the shelf? And all that happens is that when the people come in, we change the directors, we change the shareholders, and they walk out with the company. Wouldn't that be a great service? And by doing 2,000 in one go, that's just one trip to the ASIC with one check, with one lot of documents, obviously copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. And so that's what they do. They bulk make entities, and they have them sitting on the shelf. They're not doing anything. They're just sitting there on the shelf. $2 capital. They've got themselves as company shareholders and directors. And when you come in and say, I need to get a proprietary limited company, they just get you to sign a few things. You become the director, you become the shareholder. They give you $2 to take down to the bank, or $10 I think you get, to go down and open your account. And hey presto, they've done that. Now they will charge you, I think it's about $800 these days. It might have gone up, but about $800 to do that. If you did it yourself, you could probably get it done, if you knew what you were doing, probably for about $500. So you probably could do it yourself. That's the amount of fees, just $500 in fees. But you also have to have the expertise to know how to fill out every form. So most people just go to their accountant and they say, give us a shelf company. So that's how you get a proprietary limited company, by talking to your accountant and asking that if the proprietary limited company is the way to go, you ask them, can I buy a shelf company? And they will have all that ready to go, and the paperwork that you need to do. Again, you need another agreement, this time not a partnership agreement, a shareholders agreement. So if the two of you are going into business together as a proprietary limited company, you're going to have shares, obviously. Maybe it's 51-49, maybe it's 50-50, up to you how you negotiate that. But you should have a shareholders agreement to say what's going to happen in the case of default, what's going to happen, and that's where you come up with all those things. And you often take out key man insurance on each other, or key person insurance. So if someone dies, you get enough money to pay out their share, and then you can pay the wife. Otherwise, you end up in business with the wife. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, I don't know, or their brother-in-law or someone like that. We'll talk about that later. So company advantages,